Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. I'm Wendy. I'm here with Edmar and Maddie, your community team. Today we'll be discussing Python scripting components with our special guest here, Sean Taylor. But before we start today's show, I want to say a very hearty welcome back to Edmar. We missed
Oh,
you.
thank you. Thank you.
We missed you last week. You're not allowed to get sick ever again.
I have to say, I had a lot of fun watching the stream. I could tell why we have great fans watching. It was great. Last week's stream with Dave Tyner and the team
Yeah,
on the Remac car configurator was really fun to
that was
see.
fun.
Amazing visuals. So thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate it. I think all your wishes helped me get better quicker. So I won't be talking too much today, but thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, and so glad to have you here with us. It's not a family without you, so I'm so glad you're
Thank
back.
you. Thanks. That's
Um,
sweet.
yeah, we have a couple of announcements. We have 2 live streams coming up next week. On the 8th, we'll be doing USD and is it AECO?
AECO now, right? 'Cause
How it
we're
pertains to AECO. That one's going to be really cool. And then we're going to be doing, let me see here, uh, with Damien and with Aaron, talking about. I got to pull it up here real quick.
it's basically just the November
Oh,
update for Omniverse.
the Omniverse November 2022 release. So that is going to be awesome. Damien and Aaron are really fun guys. It's going to be totally fun. Don't miss it. And that's going to be next Wednesday. 11 a.m. Pacific. So that's November 8th and November 9th. We'll have 2 live streams.
A double hitter.
Yeah. And to all of you guys watching, if you haven't already, go to the website, the community website. I think it's NVIDIA Omniverse /community. Go there, sign up, start filling out your profile. What that does is it kind of lets us know, who you are, what you do, what you use Omniverse for. And we can actually tailor, things toward you, toward your interests. It also allows you to network with people. Like we have a lot of partner companies, and they sometimes need people to to help work on projects. They'll search our network for you guys. So get on there, start sharing your work, posting it in the gallery, and it's a great way for us to communicate with each other. And really, what it is it lets us build a relationship with you guys, because we love you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Maddie to introduce our guest, Sean. So yeah, take it away, Maddie.
All right. So like Wendy was saying, next week we have that live stream on new releases for November. And what we're talking about today is one of the features that's coming out that I really like. And so I thought we should have a whole live stream on just this. So Sean is here to tell us about that. Sean, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us all about?
Yeah. I'm a senior software developer at NVIDIA for probably about 7 years now, kind of in the founding group of people when we started this Omniverse project. So I've worked on, everything from the ray tracing to the physics team to the Kit SDK. Most recently, I'm on the kind of like character animation with deep learning. But as part of that, there had been a lot of requests come in from within the company for doing Python, of course, because, with deep learning and with like a lot of procedural content, there's a lot of developers that use Python. So I also had written adding support on the graph for action graphs to be able to be instanced. So one of the things that you want to have is when you have a lot of characters, you're going to want to be able to, or a lot of just entities generally in the stage, you might want to be able to like apply certain behaviors or scripts, whether they're visual or Python, and you want to be able to have unique instances of the characteristics or the code that's running. They should be running uniquely for each of those for each of those. So there's many ways you can do that, but I still think that visual scripting is like probably, in my mind, it's the easiest to get started. It's very powerful. A lot of the nodes are native, so it's super high performance. It can be distributed well, but there is a group of people that had been asking for this. So we couldn't get away from it. So I just kind of, they said, just can you write this and add this like extension so that it's more like available for everyone and it's more, integrated with common tools. So to get started, if my screen is shared,
Yes.
if you want. Okay, cool. I have an example here. This is just, by the way, this is like, the warehouse assets here. And, it's all running. I've added a bunch of characters. This has some graph on here where if I click play, I've built in that these characters are using an animation graph, which is a really simple graph that just blends an idle and a walk loop. And there's a blend amount. And I've put that each character has a separate, basically you press 1, 2, or 3, and they can basically be walking. So, we're going to go through something like this. But before we kind of get like too in the details, I wanted to just kind of like take a step back from this and kind of go like, well, what is the extension? How would you use it? Where is it? So if I were to go into the window, into the extensions, we'll start off right there. You can search up, there will be a new extension called Python Scripting Component. And inside it, basically, it has some warnings because with the power of this, you can basically, you have the full power of Python. So, everything that our tool can support. And you just have to be aware that you could open a script that has Python in it, and you have to be where where the content could be coming from. So that's something we point out. Another thing is that this extension works hand in hand. We have an actually VS Code link extension. So if you go to the VS Code link, you can turn that on, and now you can actually do debugging with the tools. So that'll give you an overhead kind of visualization that debugging is working. And that's available when you actually use VS Code link with that. So I'll just leave this floating around. So, I've enabled this extension. This extension is turned on. How does it work? So we started off by adding some integrations into the tool. One of them is whether you're on a local drive like my desktop here, or whether I'm on an Omniverse Nucleus server, such as this, you can now, create Python behavior scripts, and anyone who came from like a Unity kind of background or anything like that, Unity has the concept of what is called a mono behavior. And the mono behavior is a way that you can attach a script to any game object in a Unity. And so I think that became a popular, style throughout a lot of, game technologies. And so what we did is that you can create, first of all, scripts. So I'm just going to create a new script here. This is just an empty script. And, if that was on the server, it would upload it. And then we've also integrated in things, open or edit the script. It does actually the same operation. So if I do that, that's going to immediately open the script. And you'll see that the script got created was a class. It includes a class in it. It opens the folder that the file was in, and it automatically populates a VS Code folder. So anyone familiar with VS Code, you're going to you can open files, but one powerful thing is you can create a folder, and you can set up sort of like a session for the developer. So, and part of that is there's an interesting thing called the launch.js. So if I go to the actual kind of run and play, we actually have Python attached. So I can actually click play there, and I'm actually attached now. So like when this does attached onto any prim, I can detach. So right away, and part of this is that you can see that I've got all the code syntax highlighting. I can jump into this class that has a base class, and you can see that it has a bunch of Python. This is the constructor. It has some properties for like the prim, the USD prim that this script is attached to, the stage settings. So it has a variety of properties that are very popular that you're going to want to use throughout your writing your behaviors. And then there's some base methods that you're going to want to override. So we put those right away into the script so you can just see them running when you attach them right away. So it'll just print out, this was initialized on this prim. So what I'm going to do now is now that that script is created, I'm going to go over to, well, let's just let's create a new stage. A file new. And I've just got an empty stage here. I'm going to create a cube. Set this to 50. And let's duplicate this a couple times. And now let's say these cubes, they want to have, you know, the new script to be running on them. So what we've done is, so that you don't have to, so it kind of flows the same way that the visual scripting. If you were doing a visual script and you wanted the visual script to be unique on these, you would say add, and you would say visual scripting. And what that would do is apply visual script, and you would pick the script you want to run. In Python, the script is actually, it's a separate asset, right? It's a separate file. We don't embed it inside the stage. We let you basically attach onto these. So I can go down to this new section that gets created, and you can delete it if you don't want them anymore, but you'll see that there's like a script. So I can just take the scripts and I can just drag them on here. And you can drag as many scripts as you want, and you can reorder them, and that controls the execution order. But right now, if I were to go to the console, and I go to the information here, you can see that right away, the new script on init, world cube 1, it was actually initialized on each of those. So they each are running that script onto each one of those. And as I make changes to the script, so if I go back to the content, if I actually click here, it'll jump to the file and select it. And then you can double click it. I think I clicked open instead of select there. So, so if I were to, I'm going to try to group these a little bit, split them up a little bit, and make this smaller. You don't need to see this as much. So, and I'll bring the console back up. Okay, so let's say I want to change the contents of this, and I even just change my name in here on the load. So any changes that happen within here are actually, if I click save, you'll see that all the scripts got destroyed on each prim and reinitialized again. So we have hot reloading built into it right away. If I actually go over to here, the update happens whenever you're playing. So when I click play, you'll see that they're all running, and you know, the line that's built into there, which is the print, will happen. If that's running, and I go back to here and I change, like, let's say I just put like this, _Sean, and I click save, you can see it's immediately updated. Like so it is hot reload. Like, so this is kind of a powerful thing that you can be changing your code while you're doing it. And you can make sure it's hot reloading back and forth. And you can kind of do that way of developing if you're doing something that's maybe less stateful. And I'm going to get back to here for a second. I think we've got some other different things going on here, but I'll just clear them out for now. Okay, so I have since rather than typing all the examples in here, I've actually done a little sample that I'll open up. So if I go into this one here, this is kind of like so since this is the same script that I would have ended up typing out here, but what it did was it warned me. It said, hey, by the way, you just opened a stage and it has some scripts. So it just wants to make sure you know that it came from a source that you trust. And I say yes. So, and if I go into the actual script that I have assigned to this, so this one here, what it's doing is, I think something died on me. I'll have to just quickly fire up a new one. Yeah, this is beta software, so.
We have one question while you're loading that up. Can you save a visual script as a Python script?
No. Yeah, visual script in its nature doesn't get transcoded over to like a different language or anything, or transpiled. I don't know. I guess you'd call it transcoded. But yeah, it's not. You can't convert and switch between visual scripts and Python scripts. I think it's kind of the same way when you're in like Unreal. Like if you write some code that's in Blueprint, you can use it in C++, and you can also use C++ in Blueprints. And I think they've been trying to do some conversion code, but yeah, we don't have any way to like convert visual scripts because they're actually not really Python or C++. They're just a bunch of nodes and kind of some instructions on how the code will flow through the execution of those nodes. It doesn't really map one-to-one onto the programming language necessarily as well. So
Gotcha. Thanks.
I'm going to go back, open up that one sample that I had going on there. And then I'll just pop open another sample. So you can see inside here, I've just written some code in here where I've, I basically, on the first line, I get the actual prim path. So when I'm working on this script here, I want each one of these cubes to actually have a separate state in a sense, and I want to show people how it does have a separate state. And you can see as well, if I were to have gotten rid of this line here and I said self._prim equals self.stage, you can see we're getting autocomplete on everything, which is pretty useful in itself. Like being able to actually have code complete on everything that's enabled on the current version of the application that's running and the actual runtime environment really is great. I can be like, I want to get the prim path, and I want to be able to do it for self.prim path. So I want to make sure that get me the prim that this script is attached to. And then over here, you can see later on, I'm actually getting the attribute of the prim. And so I just got, on these cubes, I got like the display color, and then I set it to a random color basically. And that's why every time I save this file as well, if I were to just come in here and click save, every single time I save, it's reloading the scripts. Therefore, the initializer getting called, and you can see the actual colors are randomly changing as I save. So it kind of shows you that you may not want that behavior, but it's kind of showing you that this is the kind of power you could be doing if you wanted it. As well as I'm deleting subscriptions when I shut down. So when I save, it's deleting the timeline subscription. Inside here, what I'm just doing is when I click play, because I was listening for timeline events, I was just really marking that it is playing while they're changing. I could have also just checked timeline is playing up here as well and ad hoc switched it inside here, but I just showed that you can register in your initialization for the things that only need to be done once. And then the things that happen at runtime, you can be more efficient with them. So then therefore events can come in, you can change state in your objects, such as whether you're playing or not, and maybe even potentially color or anything you really want. And that will allow you to kind of process the update in a more stateful way rather than waiting and polling and doing something that maybe is more complex, or an event that may come in that would slow down your update. So when I'm running here, this is just really just animating these cubes at some, it's just changing the, pretty much the rotate XYZ by one of the actual axes of the Euler. So that's just kind of an example. But what I'll show you now is, let's say I wanted to debug this. I'm like, what is the rotation? This code's not working right. We obviously have logging. I always promote logging as the best way of debugging, but sometimes it's easier just to break here. I want you to break right here. So what I can do is I can go in here and I can click here, and by default inside here, you can see that we have this drop down. That's the default we built into that launch, and you can click attach there. Now, if I come in here, I can set a breakpoint, and I am playing now. So I click here and boom, I hit the breakpoint. And so you can check all the information here. What's my rotate? I can do F10. And now the rotation is that. If I run F5 and run it again, F10, the rotation is so going to hover more and so on. And I can turn this off and F5 and it keeps running. So, and you can see over here,
does that break for every instance?
It breaks for every instance. Yes.
Very cool.
So, which is, a challenge in itself if you have to know. So that's why, debugging is kind of powerful, because I can actually look at, if I click here, here, and I take a look at the self, I can actually see what's the prim path. Well, it's cube 1. And, if I hit in here again, sorry, what's it this time? It should be self cube 2, right? And so on. And the order of these are executing basically 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you have scripts that are running, and I actually attach over here onto a, this is locked up the execution over here. I'm going to stop here. So if I'm inside here and I wanted to actually add a second script you could just do that. You just create a script and attach it. Another thing that we added in here is there's also an empty script. So if you actually create this, I could just be like, well, this is just a, util script. And therefore you could come into here and you could add anything you wanted. So you could say like, def do this, and let's say print, just do this. And I save that. And now over here inside my script here, I could put in right here at the front, I could import up here, import import utils. Let's say import dot util script. What do I want to import? Let's say from import. And it's got all the completion about like what you can do. And then now down here, I can actually use that. So if I want to be like, do this and click save, and I'm running and it's saying do this, right? So you now have the ability to like organize your code. We don't want to make these monolithic scripts that, everything's inside them and every single one, copies the code from another script. And we realized that so what we've done, I wanted to kind of give people, a lot of like the nerds out there will want to know like, how the heck are you doing this? Does this work on Omniverse? Like, by the way, you can do this not only on local drives, you can do this on Omniverse drives. So if I'm over here, I'll give you let me close this for a sec. I'm going to create a new, don't save, and I'll just throw this on the light. Doesn't even matter. Add Python scripting. And if I go here, I'm inside actually like, this is my account, but it's on a Nucleus server. I'm going to create a script here. And I'm going to double click this. And it's actually like editing the file locally and letting you make the changes and apply it back. Well, VS Code, we don't run and execute the scripts like remotely, but we're allowing people to kind of like keep the scripts on the Nucleus server so that if you're working together, let's say Maddie's kind of like working on the script and then he's done. One of the wish list items was like locking. We're looking at how to lock this because we do have checkpoints for version control. So that's already built into like assets generally, like our USC files. But people will want to be able to like collaborate. They'll want to be able to like not only like share their art content or the worlds that they're building, but the actual scripts themselves. So this script here, as soon as I make a change to this, let's say I did put in John T here and I save it. If I close this, and I double click it again, the file's got Shanti. So what we're doing under the hood is we've written our own custom. Oh, and also you can debug this. So when I go and apply this script here, down to here, once again, that got loaded on distant light, the script there. And if I actually come in here and I go to here and I attach, boom, I'm attached. And if I click here and I click play, you can see that it's actually essentially it's debugging. You can think of it as remotely. It's not running remotely. The scripts are running locally. What we do is we bring them back and we run them inside, kind of like how the app is running in its own OV kind of cache. We've got a Python cache. And so the only thing that, because we don't have locking, the word to the wise, is that if whoever saves first will trump the other one. We do have checkpoints. So if I run this and I stop this, if I come over here and I save, that will have reloaded. If I go over to the file here, it does have a checkpoint of all the saves. So be it at may, we don't have like a official, like, I want to make a checkpoint. Every save does do a checkpoint, which is what our system does naturally. But I know that there's some programmers that are like, write a line of code, save, write a line of code, save, and then they commit when they're ready. But then there's other programmers who kind of like code, save, and then they commit to things like traditional Git version control. So we've had some requests for two things. One of them is, for Python, what's your plans for kind of Git and maybe integrating that? We don't really have like all the answers washed out yet. I think we want to talk to our community, put this in kind of, this is a beta. We're going to get some feedback. Funny enough, like as I was using stuff like this, I was using other things that were shown to me like yesterday, like, hey, there's this cool embedded VS Code from the community. And I was like, oh, cool. How does that work? And it had like things like, let's say you want to do like prims, like, get at the active, and it's like a snippets tool. I'm like, this is amazing. So we're going to like listen to the community, kind of like find out like how this should be done in a way that's kind of jives with working with Nucleus. And then kind of like maybe we'll make a VS Code extension. We also know there's other tools out there other than VS Code that are popular. Right now we've done VS Code because we have a tight integration. It's cross-platform. It works on Windows, Linux. So we're cool with that. If you don't have VS Code, it will at least use Notepad on Windows and gedit on Linux. So there's something there to edit with. It won't give you debugging support and, like code complete, because those tools don't have that technology built into it. But we will look for, future integrations, I think, as we move forward with this. But that's kind of the fundamentals of what this tech is going to give you. If I were to open up a sample like I was playing with here, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And yes, this has scripts. I agree to it. And you can see a nice, big world, fly around in it. It's amazing. But I've just dropped these characters. These characters are using some of the stuff that we have inside the animation graph. So we have, you can use a traditional blend tree style writing characters. We're working on a lot of new R&D moving forward. Probably seen a lot of hype going on about that. But right now I was like, okay, well, maybe I can give them an example. So inside this script, which is applied to these three, I've added two scripts. So I put a prim here that I've actually tied a draw script. So this one is a really simple script. All it did was it set up some timelines. I'm going to make this a little bigger. I created an overlay basically by getting the active viewport. I got a frame into that, and then I set on it whenever we basically are playing, we show the UI, and I just set a build function on it, and then clear the frame in between. And as part of the setting the build function, I this is the build you should do, like draw this UI. Every update, the build function will potentially update if you want as well. Like you can make that as dynamic as you want. I think this is just really doing a build, whatever the play happens, because we don't need to be updating. It is an overlay. It's in the front. And I'm just building, a little bit of a layout here, and I just hard coded together like a little overlay. So it just kind of shows you could be using now the UI system in your content, not just in extensions. You could build basically like content and decorate anything you see us kind of doing. You can build that into on a per stage level, your own content, and reuse those scripts. So if you have a script that's kind of really cool and you're writing your own like deep learning kind of like procedural tooling, and you want to like start building your own libraries inside that, all the stages that every content developer makes, you can start making your own pipelines for building content as well, with kind of this idea of introducing the Omni UI inside it, as well as inside this instancing Python script that I put on these three characters. I put it on all three. What this one does is, this one is just inside the init, which happens on the script assigned or loaded. All it's doing is it's going and getting the keyboard and the input from the default app. Then it gets the prim for this prim that the script, so every single character would get its own one of these instances. This would be a different prim for each of them, of course. And then I hard coded a little mapping for only 3 characters, of course. But you could make that a lot more dynamic, where each character could use a system where they get like their keys or their key mappings from a multiplayer mapping. And then what I did was on destroy. So I'm playing around with this variable that is inside. If I go over to the animation graph for this, which was also assigned on each one of these skull roots. So each one of these has an animation graph, and you can see the variables. You can see that these graph have a blend weight assigned to it. So what happens is the graph is executed every frame, which is how our character tech is working. We have an idle animation and a walking animation and a blend. And anyone familiar with blend trees, this is how you do blend trees. You basically build up either complex state machines, and we're just playing around with a variable that's accessible via the Python. So the Python is, in this case, just like changing how much to blend between walking and the walk on this key that you're pressing. So I was like, what's the least complexity I could do to show them kind of a footing into some of this tech that you can do. And so inside the update, you need to get the character only when it's playing, because the character only gets initialized when it's played. So you get the character, and then after that, it's just going to set the variable. But in between that, I was just doing something like just, let's say, growing the amount of blend based on how long you press a key, plus or minus. Like if you let go, I'm slowing you down. And so, you could write this into how physically accurate you wanted it or simulated. You could use real world physics. You can use our physics SDK. You can use audio. You can use basically every single extension we have is now at the power of what you can put in these scripts on a per prim level. So hopefully that inspires you to think that, like, how would I use this? Oh man, there's a lot I could do with this. I'm sure Maddie's like, oh man, I could.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
somebody here,
stop and leave some questions here.
yeah. Somebody here in the comments are saying it looks rather advanced, and yeah, you have the full power of Omniverse development at the tip of your fingers in these scripts, and
Yes.
you can throw it on anything.
And you can make it as simple as you want. Like that script could be like literally just like, let's say I want to randomly, like, let's say just kind of like drop these characters all over the stage and come up with an algorithm that I like for doing that or whatever. It could be simple, like, make sure I'm not hitting anything or divide the grid up, or, there's a lot of kind of like, I'll call it like, drop or scatter algorithm. So you could use this for like something simple, like just random placement of things. You could build all where these boxes are, like all with an initialization script that is on the world. Like it's not even on a per item. So it could be at the scope. In Unreal, you kind of have this concept of a level blueprint, and then they have actor blueprints. With the way we've done it, you get the kind of like, we don't really have like the distinguishing sets of nodes that work with one or the other. And it's just like, you can write any API you want. You can assign them at the scope of any prim being the world, or like every single like box if you wanted, which brings me to a point though, is like kind of like performance. So Python, it will, it is at the limitation of what Python can do. I would highly recommend that you consider, if you're going to be doing like super high performance scripting, to really look at visual scripting. It really allows you to take power of like nodes that are very native. You can kind of split apart the processing on different stages of the pipeline, such as like ticks and kind of like application updates or all sorts of things like that, and break up the processing a lot more with the visual scripting. So this is meant to fill the gap for all the people that want to still be able to do quite a bit of stuff with Python, and they don't yet they just know Python, so they're like, can I just start coding, right? And I actually think it's completely worth it to learn visual scripting. It's a super powerful thing, and that's when I worked on the OmniGraph, working on the instancing that I did, like really like was amazing to see how this visual scripting is growing in such a short time. But I knew that this was going to come. People were going to ask us for a Python solution that's fairly flexible. So this is what we've come up with for the first beta, and hopefully.
Yeah, I think it's not. This isn't replacing anything. It's just another tool in your toolbox. There was somebody else is kind of getting the point is that it's a very accessible USD hacking tool, and that's where how I see it is. I'm going to use this to prototype. I'm just going to write a script on a prim and try something out, and then if I want to, then I can formalize it into an extension or a visual script, whatever, wherever I need to take it. But to me, this is the easiest way to just jump in and just start hacking away.
Yeah, and in case you didn't record this video, which I know it's all recorded, we're getting kind of early. I've asked them to post this is a committed feature. It's coming in. It's a beta feature, but I've asked them already on the doc. So if you actually go in and we can post this link, this will be the user manual on just the basics on setting up a new script, everything I kind of showed you. And script execution, it'll explain a couple of the details of what these methods do. This is, script is when it's initialized. This one's when it's destroyed. This is when the timeline is being played. Some defaults for if you don't have it, explaining hot scripts, script errors. So let's say I'm inside a script as an example. Let me pull up this one here. So this script, right? Let's open up this one. This one's a little bit easier. And so if I'm inside here and I open up, and let's say I just make a coding mistake and I click save, what's happening is, and I think we're working on some ways to improve this. This is where but you'll see that in the console, we're putting it as an error. We've kept the stack rather short. So it will tell you that, hey, on, line 9, you've got an invalid syntax for Python. So I go to line 9, put it back, and I click save, and boom, it's back to initialized again. It didn't initialize, and it ran, and then you can clear. So the documentation is covering, where can you see your errors, and then kind of the instructions on the script debugging, and then the link to the new VS Code documentation that we've also put inside there for generally. This does cover extension debugging, but the workflow I'll say copied. We aligned to make sure that the workflow is exactly the same for extension debugging versus basically content script debugging. So yeah.
Very cool. Let me check if we have any other questions.
There was a question earlier. Can you let me find it. I have to scroll up a little bit. Can you dynamically change textures as well?
Sure.
Or materials?
Anything definitely. You definitely can. You could now remember textures, materials, when they're assigned to things, if they're not loaded, will be loading, right? So I would recommend that at least in the initialize, you would maybe like apply them to some object that's maybe not, in the viewport of the scope, or you do some like kind of like loading of the materials. Otherwise, you're going to get loading. If you were changing, like if you went through all the materials and like rotated through the materials, you're just going to see a loading. So techniques that game engines typically do is they'll typically like preload materials ahead of time, and then at runtime you could switch them on the fly if that's something that you wanted to do. So there's always the traditional practices of how to do it. But like, yes, if there's APIs that we have, such as like changing materials, I think we have as an example, there's a set MDL parameter that you can do. So you could just change MDL parameters, which mean, values or textures or anything,
Nice.
and that would be completely acceptable to do anything like that on the fly. Like it's no different than me changing the line here as this is running to be like this and taking the line out where it says, if I go to this method here and I jump to it and I say, hello, Wendy. And I click save. And now you got hello, Wendy. That's gonna, oh, did I get a, and is it printing that? I think there's some problem with it. Let's see, one sec. Oh, I have a coding error.
I broke it.
You broke it. Yeah. I gotta fix it. Right now we're like close to release. So there's been a couple hiccups and some of the builds are getting close near the end, we'll say. That's all we can really say. But yeah, so changes will be dynamic as you're going. I think what happens is that as we're loading, okay, this brings up to the point. So here's a limitation of that file. So this file here, when we load things and change them, it doesn't preload the full stack of dependencies. So you do have to basically open the scripts, save them, and then rerun. And that should be, what's going on there? Yeah, I'll have to check what's going on. I think there's some.
Do you only hot reload the scripts that are attached? Is that what it is?
That's right. It only hot reloads the scripts that are attached because there was no way currently that we have built into this massive meta finder and source loader without probably being too aggressive in the loading rather than letting you control what to reload based on the saves that you do. So, that's kind of, I think we're kind of finding our way here a little bit. Like, it's like, we've got to figure out how much of this is a script versus a library as well, right? So there may be the concept that we may introduce like libraries where you're actually like binding a library rather than a script. And I think we've got to put this out in the hands of kind of like just like people to play with to see where they're going to go with this. And I'm trying to think of some other really useful use cases that were coming up. So one of the things that people were asking about, was about procedural generation in the scope of like deep learning. So a lot of people are doing things like using this technology to procedurally generate content and then writing out outputs like buffers and things like that they can do deep learning on. And so even with our own company and our internal tech, a lot of people have been wanting to do this sort of scripting to kind of like procedurally describe the setup for deep learning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a lot of researchers out there who are really like focused on Python as the language for them to be able to do this. It's a really powerful yet, like quick and get started and it with no compiling and just like quick changes and get the results. So I would definitely say that this is probably going to be really attracted to like the deep learning community because of the ability to be able to use Python at their fingertips within a content tool, right? And like there's a lot of like, I think game engines alike, this is not, we don't put ourselves as a game engine. This is really a full world simulation technology for content authoring. This now brings the ability to do some kind of like behavior and setup and, kind of like seeding of the content as well. And visual scripting and now Python scripting is really a powerful way to do that. So I would probably promote this to those developers.
Another question that came up. Do you know if you can throw warp into the mix with this?
You cannot right now that we've tested. But sorry, we have not checked it out yet.
Okay.
It may just work. Yeah. I suspect that there's going to be some differences. We are using the Python runtime that's been set up for this, so there is a potential that there's some minor fixes we need to do to make it work. But I'm going to just tag that on the wish list because that's kind of a cool thing to ask for.
Yeah.
Really.
The idea was, where you need performance, throw warp in there.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of companies out there, I won't name any, that are really focused on making Python a lot more performant in the long run. So, I'll always still say it's Python. It is like not what it is, but it's Python. So, the conditions that are governed around Python runtime, we can circumvent with improvements that companies out there are working on adamantly, and warp is one thing that is super powerful. So I think we want to highly consider it as a viable, powerful force we should be adopting as well. So.
Very cool. Yeah. And you were talking about use cases. The one that you brought up is code as content, and the use of the Nucleus servers is interesting for that, right? Because then you can share your asset inside of your organization. You have somebody open up an asset, and they've immediately got access to the code as well, because it's all referenced, or it's an absolute path on the server. So that works out great.
Transitioning that code later potentially off the microservices as well, right? So like it'll just make it that much easier to potentially move that over. And I think that's an area we're going to be looking at a lot in the future anyhow. It's super powerful to be able to like start testing, run locally or run somewhere else, right? So being able to run Python somewhere else is a natural thing for people anyhow. Like, hey, what code were you running there? Can I redistribute that out? So there is that ability to do that, and then maybe even later port that to different languages. So I think that like code on the server is not only for sharing, it could be for an ability to break things off easier as you move forward for the content. But if I were to make like one script here that did some useful functionality and like 100 scenes, and each one of those scenes use those scripts, now you've got like an M times N kind of like, you're basically getting a multiplicity of using functionality that's exposed on the server to anyone across any content, really, as long as the requirements are fulfilled when you apply that on there. Like obviously, like this script that I wrote that is applied onto the character had a requirement of getting a character, therefore it needed an animation graph. So it had some requirements to it, and you could put inside your initialize as well when you try to assign those things like, oh, you could warn them like you can't apply this to this sort of a script, it needs to be on. So you could put like your own logging. You could even write UI. You could put a UI to help you pick. Let's say you wrote a vehicle controller or something like that, like drop it on a car, and maybe it prompts you to get a GUI now to pick the tires and do it the way you wanted it, right, for your game or for your simulation tech that you're planning to do. And then you pick the wheel, so that UI is actually asking you for prims in the stage. You select those. Now you actually have an overlay of the vehicle, and now you can use any content vehicle you want, but you've written kind of like a car configurator, like we've seen in the visual scripting sort of thing. So yeah, I wouldn't take it too far that you really have a lot of power to, kind of like take this as far as you want and share the scripts broadly across your kind of like content base.
Yeah. Cool. I have one question that I keep on thinking about, and I don't remember where we landed on this. USDZ, does it package the Python files too?
It doesn't, but it does do collect. So currently, let's say I have this stage, which is using that script. So if I do like a file collect as, and I'm going to make another folder there. Let's say inside here, I make a new folder called, well, actually, it'll collected instancing. There it is there. And I say start. So, well, maybe I shouldn't have collected this one. Should I have? Yeah. it's inside that folder. It will not only have the hundreds of content, that this has. Oh, it's not too bad. Okay. It is collecting the USD and the instancing.py. So I'm not sure what we're doing generally for USDZ. So if I go in here, you'll see the instancing is there and the draw scripts are there. So it can be collected, but I know that USDZ is embedding. Well, it's not embedding. Let's say it's compressing this file, right?
No, actually, it doesn't compress. It's actually just an uncompressed zip.
Oh,
So
okay. I thought it was also supported zlib or something like that as an option, but no. Okay. So we'll take a look at that. I wouldn't. I'm afraid to ask a stupid question, but so how is the USDZ currently integrated in our stuff?
I guess you could do file open or file import, and it would let you add a USDZ either you could add it as a reference, or I think you could open it as a stage.
We can save this as USDZ then, right? File save as.
Yeah, you could export, but save as USDZ.
Let's do a smaller file than this one.
Yeah.
1 second here. Let's do this one here. Yes, and I'll say file save as. No,
we don't have that option there. What about export? File export.
Maybe I think you're right. That's where it would be. File export.
No,
not yet.
Okay, well then that actually we don't have the UX for it.
Yeah, I thought we only did the binary one right now. It's becoming more popular, right? With like a bundle. Yeah, basically a package in a sense. When it's being I thought it was like some zip compressed generally. Also, if you wanted, there's options for it, but because that would be good. I mean, if you had a lot of content in it, it could add another layer of compression. Yeah. I know that there's other things out there, but so we'll take a look into that. I guess is that to safely redistribute then, right? Like with trust, right? Like we had been talking about different options on how to secure the content as well that you trust to another user. Like let's say I were to give you a script and by the way, I just got it from my friend. And so there's a lot of discussions. Security is at the heart of everything at NVIDIA. So we're prime time focusing on how we can completely improve this all the time. Right now, I would say that this is great for within your Nucleus server and at least putting within there that you're sharing within them and for yourself to write them and create your own content that's dynamic by nature and have behaviors.
Yep, very cool. I'm really excited to play with this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
This will be coming, as you can see, the 2022.3.0. Since it's a programming one, it doesn't always get visually highlighted because it's not as visually stunning, even to fill like an hour of explaining the basics of doing this. Some artists are potentially excited and some of them are more tech savvy. Some of them are I want to go learn Python. So there's so many, you've got a lot of spectrum of people who may or may not be interested, but it doesn't always show up in slideshows as nicely so. But it is, I think it's going to be a quite useful tool out there for some people that are Python developers, and I expect it to be in this upcoming release.
Cool. All right. I think we're good on questions. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, Sean, and thank you for teaching us about Python scripting components.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me, and awesome.
Yeah, we'll have to have you on again, definitely. If you have time.
We got to get updates too on your dog's progress.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
She's looking at something else.
She's like,
big yellow ball. Oh,
she's like, I'm going this way. Now. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
High school's over today, so.
I was gonna say, I thought they gave you the middle paw.
Yeah.
So just to briefly mention though that we saw a lot of comments dispersed throughout the stream that people really impressed about this layer of new access. So really, and for people who are veteran Python devs too. So really great that you're able to walk everybody through this. If anyone who has questions after the stream, feel free to post them on Discord. Let me see, Sean, are you active on any of the developer channels on our Discord? Or are you mostly mostly?
I'm under the hood usually, like writing like Omniverse from the ground up on different areas. But I'm going to try to, obviously, like when I'm contributing here, I want to participate in that community. So I'll be on there to try to like answer any questions on there. And
Yeah, I was going to say we have a channel called General Scripts Python under the developers category. Which, Maddie, would you say this is the best channel to post questions on this?
Yeah, for sure.
that seems like a good one. Yeah.
All right, cool. So there you go, folks. If you want to post any questions, go to the Discord server, discord.gg/NVIDIA Omniverse developers category channel. We have a channel specifically called General Scripts Python. But this video will be a great resource. Before we go, is there anything that you feel like, maybe it's not in the documentation yet, or any kind of tip or trick for people that maybe you want to throw in here at the last second for people getting started on this? You pretty much covered everything from scratch, so I don't think so. But just last call.
Yeah, I know someone mentioned a scripting library, so setting something like that up would be very handy.
I think so. One of the main things that I want to try to do, because now that we have these libraries, so like, let me give you an example. This one here, that get prim at path, the USD library doesn't return anything. So we don't actually know the type. So when you go to use the prim after, we don't always have all the typing information. So we're working on making sure we try to, even in our own libraries, have a little bit more annotated, I guess, information about all the actual types so that you can have more code complete. And I think that us trying to, introduce, there's a coding error. Yeah, so us being able to, overall solve a lot of the information on how to code, like even our product managers who are working in different areas, they're like, hey, how do I write these scripts and do that? And so like, there's a lot of tools, even people in the open source kind of like, or I don't even know if this is open source or not, but this tool here has a lot of snippets because, like, we have it all put in a lot of different places, but we don't necessarily have snippets. So I think there's been kind of like a motivation really to try to like draw out the important developer docs that are meant for kind of like specifically doing behaviors, and maybe organize them in a way that's like based on USD, or kit hooks like integration points, such as like, how do I add like context menus into like the stage, or like we're even using certain things that we expose people don't know are there, right? And so there's kind of like USD fundamentals, there's the kit SDK, and like all the powerful like APIs that Damien and their team are exposing. There's the UI, which is also kind of obviously part of that. It's a building block. And then there's the Carbonate, like the carb framework for doing everything from input to settings to like tasking to like very powerful things that we do have docs on, but it may not be all annotated in the right way. So you may not get all the code complete. So we may be going back now and being like, hey, let's add some annotations to things that are missed here and there. Even though they run and they work, people, when they click the dot button on the timeline here, they want to know all the methods that they can do. And then when they use that method, they want to know the types that they can use. So get start type, and it'll give you, it's a float, right? They didn't,
Nice.
If it's primitive types, you know what they are, but like, like some of these complex types that are coming from the API, sometimes we haven't put them as the actual return type. So we might be going back and trying to improve some of those things. That's kind of the feedback I've been giving the SDK team.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Appreciate it, Sean.
Okay.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thank you very much.
So, I mean, thanks, Sean. Thanks, Edmar. Thanks, Maddie. This was a great live stream. Of course, this will be available on YouTube a few minutes after the stream goes live. It's available on Twitch. So if you guys want to rewatch it and share it with anyone, go for it. And we'll see you guys next week on Tuesday for the USD and why it's good for AECO. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you then. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
I
Bye, everyone.
Forward.
Awesome.